Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 9th chapter. Now Jesus and the disciples went on and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" They were silent. On the way, they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down and called the 12 and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. As we are now close to the end of our time together, I would hope that you can indulge me for a few minutes just for a little, shall we say, walk down memory lane, just for a few minutes. But I'd like to share with you that certainly we have come a long way, done a lot of things together in 15 years. And looking out over you, I know there are a number of you who weren't here 15 years ago, and that's a good thing. It's a blessed thing for all of us together. I remember the first time I came to St. Mark. Ed Baumgartner picked me up from the airport and drove over here. We drove over here, and those of you who know me well know that I have an appreciation for architecture, particularly church architecture. And I mean this with no offense to anybody, but landing here was a bit like ending up in architectural purgatory. It just is. And it was. You know. And so we come in, Ed brings me in, and we're looking, and nothing here looks like it did 15 years ago. If you were here, nothing here looks like it did 15 years ago. None of that was over here. And everything from this side over looked different. I mean, there was stuff piled up over that side of the nave, and there was this mauve carpet in here. I know the person who picked that mauve carpet isn't here any longer, so I can say that. Who has the mauve carpet? So the mauve carpet, and then you go down to what was the social hall at that point. We didn't have any of this nice stuff here. What served as a social hall was this room, again, stuff piled up in it. And the carpet, if you remember that far, the carpet was held together with duct tape. And the curtain, the room was to be divided up for Sunday school, not with those hard dividers, but literally with a curtain, a brown curtain that came pulled along on a pole. And here's the best part. My office, of which I was going to ultimately shoehorn about 1,100 books into, was truly 100 square feet. It was about 10 by 10. And so here we are, we're looking at all of this stuff. But the only reason we came here was because of Ed Walker. Ed was the one who talked me into coming here. And he said to us, "These are really good people here, and they'll do really good things." That's what he said to us. And he was persuasive enough that we believed him. And so we came. And here we are. And now, 15 years later, we can think back about all of that stuff and how all of this, at least physically, has changed in dramatic ways. And we can think back over ministry and a lot of things, and how we went from a congregation of approximately 400 to a congregation of approximately 1,100. We can think about how, if you ever came to the pastor's office, it was, Dwayne Nelson said to me one time, it's like sitting in a confessional booth because it was so close. There were these two hard little chairs in there. If any of you ever remember being in there, two hard little chairs in there, and it wasn't the one that I sat in, let me tell you. And you'd sit there, and your knees would bang the desk, and there was the mauve carpet, and none of that there. And we've done those sorts of things. and we've done really great things together. And we've fallen off the ledge a few times, but you don't do really great things without being able to take some risks. And you don't take some risks without sometimes failing. And those things all go together with that. But I'm also reminded not only of these tangible things that we can see, but I think also the things that we've done with young people in these 15 years. I remember taking young people to Key West. I remember Travis coming with us. I was just looking at pictures of that this past week, Travis, and a bunch of other kids, and how they were so different than the other kids that we met up with down there. And the seriousness that our kids had about themselves and their purposes for being there, so dramatically different than those other kids who went for vacation. And I think about going to New York City with kids and pumping them all over the city and worshiping in all of these different churches because the pastor said they had to. They never complained. They never complained, at least not to me. Maybe that's because they do that. They never complained to me. I remember walking with kids for 75 miles in Spain, and I remember what it was, that all of the things I had hoped for them came true at the end of the 75 miles. Your sister, what's your sister? I mean, there are days that my favorite, if the day is really bad, I pop a CD into my computer, and there's an image of Kathleen Crisp jumping up and down in the plaza in front of the church in South Carolina, and how that trip changed her life. And I remember a year and a half ago being in Rome, and Ian was there going with us, and as we sat at dinner the last night, we talked about what was the most meaningful thing. And nobody brought up seeing the Colosseum. Nobody brought up going to St. Peter's. Nobody talked about playing the piazzas and evening. Everybody talked about Eucharist and the catacombs. And how somehow we all felt close to these ancient Christians whose souls were in that place, many of them who died. The thing that was closest to us was being close to them. But I will share with you, there is even more of the things that we've done here. When I first got here, really, if you remember back there, we were nice people, but we didn't do a whole lot outside of right in this place. And there was this woman, she was in the Air Force, her name was Jean, and she was Hispanic, and her husband was living here as well, and she said, we need to help poor people. Excellent idea. She said, and we're going to help poor people down at St. John's Kitchen for the Homeless down in Hampton, and we're going to do this, and we're going to be part of it every month. And that's going to be a ministry that we're going to be part of. And so down to St. Paul's, as we go down there week after week, month after month, that legacy that she brought to us continues in our life together. And from that came more people who after that moment said, we can do this. We can make pillows for heart patients. We can collect offerings for the food bank. We can visit prisoners in jail. We can be responsible for children in Ecuador. We could serve and be responsible for ministry to children in China. And all of these things because somebody said, we can do this. We should do this. We can be present in the lives of people who are here. And so what became a church which was in many ways very insular and very self-focused became a place that not only built a building, but built a church. Build a parish that somehow reaches itself well outside of the bounds of the road that passes in front of it. And we became that church. But the thing that I'm promising, is that when we first got here, I remember hearing there are these people who live about 2 miles away from us, and nobody does anything down there, right? Because those people are different from us. And that's the feeling in York County, that there's that neighborhood different down there. Nobody does anything down there. They're different from us. And you know where I speak. To go down to Lackey is to go into another part of our county that everybody would rather forget. 15 years ago, nobody cared about that because that was down there. Our ministry was someplace else. And how now this summer, Mary Little got a group of people together to serve lunch to children down there for a week during a summer program, collected things to help get kids ready to go to school this fall. For our neighbors down there. You see, somehow, learning how to love people who are far away makes our hearts big enough to love people who are close in. Learning how to help people who are down in Hampton makes it possible to learn how to love people who are in Ecuador. Learning how to love people who are in Ecuador gives your heart something that's large enough to help people who are close to you. The hardest people to like are the ones who live next to you. The hardest people to like are the ones that share the pew with you. The hardest people to be in ministry with are the ones you know. Because it's easy to forget who they are. And in many ways, it's a blessing that somehow this lesson butts up to this week. Because that's what Jesus is really saying. And we hear this story, you know, unless you welcome people like this child that he scoops up, you don't see the kingdom of God. That being God's people is like loving this child here. And so we somehow idolize the children in that story. But what he's saying is that if you want to be great, you need to be able to look at the world in the way that God looks at the world. If you want to be great and do great things, you have to be able to see the world the way God sees it. And so to be able to do great things, you need to be able to love the people who are close to you, even if it takes 15 years. What we accomplished here isn't summed up in a building. It isn't summed up in paying off a mortgage. It isn't summed up in even sending our kids to faraway places. It finally, at the end of the day, it's summed up by hearing the words of Jesus. It reminds us to see the world in God's way. To be able to look down the street at the people who are different from us and say, they're our neighbors, and we're part of that, and they're part of us. I would hope that as you move through the week that is ahead, that somehow you can love the people who are in that house with you, that are down the street from you, who are part of your life, the ones sometimes we want to forget, the ones sometimes that somehow are better left over there because they're not like us. But that by God's grace we see the world